I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. I just slid the 1923 water rights deed across the table and watched 35 McMansions turn into lakefront property in their minds. The Willowbrook Estates HOA thought they could steal my grandfather's farm while I was deployed in Afghanistan. These pompous bureaucrats built their perfect suburban paradise on stolen land, complete with tennis outfit Karens patrolling in golf carts. What they didn't know was that I'm an Army Corps engineer. That little earth dam on my property had been waiting 45 years for someone stupid enough to build downstream. The audacity was truly something to behold. Until the spillway gates opened and their luxury development got its first taste of natural flooding, I stayed quiet. This was going to be satisfying. But before that, let me introduce myself. My name's Jake Morrison, 34 years old, Army Corps of Engineers, and third-generation owner of 47 acres of prime Texas land just outside Austin. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. My grandfather, everyone called him Pops, bought this property back in 1955, when Austin was still a sleepy college town and barbecue joints outnumbered tech companies 1,000 to 1. Pops was the kind of man who believed in taking care of the land and the people on it. In 1978, he built a small earth dam on our property. Nothing fancy, just solid engineering designed to collect rainwater for the cattle and help our downstream neighbors during dry spells. The Army Corps of Engineers even helped him with the design. Pops always said that someday the back 40 acres would be worth something special, but for now it was just beautiful rolling hills where we ran cattle and I learned to hunt. Years later, I'd learned that water isn't just about survival, it's power. After my 2 tours in Afghanistan, where I specialized in water management and infrastructure, I understood that better than anyone. Building wells in a war zone teaches you how precious clean water is and how fast people will fight over it. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. While I was on my second deployment, Pops passed away. The property went into a trust, managed by my sister Sarah in California, a kind soul but no clue about Texas land law. She hired a property management company called Lonier Land Services to handle taxes and upkeep. The taxes got paid automatically, but Sarah never looked at the assessments. Big mistake. Enter our villain, Margaret Maggie Thornwell, 52 years old, president of Willowbrook Estates HOA. She's the type who drives a white BMW X7 and treats tennis outfits like business attire. Maggie had that sweet southern charm that could curdle milk, the kind where she'll smile while stabbing you in the back and make it sound like she's doing you a favor. Married to City Councilman Rick Thornwell, she knew exactly how to pull strings. When I came home from deployment in August 2023, I was ready to spend real time on Pop's land. Drove down that gravel road, past the old oak tree where I'd carved my initials as a kid. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Expected to see rolling pastures and the little dam sparkling under the Texas sun. Instead, I found construction crews, concrete trucks, and survey stakes scattered like an invasion. The crunch of gravel under my boots sounded angry. I could taste dust and fury as I marched up to the foreman. "Sorry, buddy," he said, not looking sorry at all. "We got permits and everything. This is Willowbrook Estates property now." I called the police. Officer Martinez showed up and explained that the HOA had filed an adverse possession claim while I was overseas. Apparently, if no one uses land for a while and someone improves it, they can claim ownership. It's an old law meant for forgotten land, but these people used it as a weapon. That's when Maggie appeared, gliding up in her golf cart like some suburban warlord. Her voice was syrupy sweet. "Your family abandoned this land, honey," she said. "We're just putting it to good use for the community." But what really made my blood boil was what they did next. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Her crews had diverted the small creek that fed Pop's dam. The water level dropped every day. 45 years of careful water management. Gone. As I watched the creek dry, her parting shot echoed in my ears. "You should have stayed closer to home, soldier boy." That's when I knew This wasn't about land. It was war. I hired an attorney, but the man quoted me $85,000 just to challenge the zoning change. Turns out, Maggie's husband, Rick, had pushed through an emergency rezoning while I was away. My family's land went from agricultural to residential overnight. Conflict of interest didn't even begin to cover it. But I wasn't just some angry landowner. I was trained to find weaknesses: legal, structural, tactical. While that overpriced lawyer billed me for paper shuffling, I hit the county archives like a mission, and what I found made my pulse quicken. Pops's original 1,978 decameters permits, signed off by the Army Corps of Engineers. That meant federal jurisdiction. Local HOAs couldn't override that. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. My tongue tasted metallic as the realization hit me. This wasn't a property dispute, it was a federal case. Then I found gold. A 1923 water rights deed buried in the records. My great-grandfather had purchased senior water rights to the entire Willow Creek watershed. Older than the city, older than the county, older than every McMansion sitting on my land. They hadn't just stolen property, they were stealing my water. Maggie, of course, played the victim. She called the local news, standing in front of her manicured lawn, saying, "We're just worried about the children's safety. That dam looks ready to burst." The news ran it without checking facts. If they had, they'd have seen my dam past every inspection in 45 years. Then came the online harassment. Maggie's next-door post warned of unstable veterans in the area. No name, but everyone knew. The air smelled of diesel and cedar pollen as I stood on my porch, watching their crews pour concrete day and night. Every new foundation they laid was a nail in Pop's legacy. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Every drop the dam lost was another inch of my patience gone. That's when I made one call that changed everything. Tony Riggs, my old Army buddy, now working with the EPA. He said just one thing: "Jake, if they diverted that creek without permits, it's a federal violation." I started documenting everything: trail cams, flow meters, time-stamped photos. The evidence stacked up, and so did my anger. Sarah begged me to walk away. But this wasn't about money anymore. It was about what was right. The HOA thought they were building a paradise. They didn't know they'd built it below a federal dam. And as the storm clouds rolled in over Willow Creek, I started to remember what Pops used to say every time it rained. Water always finds its way home. And this time, I was going to help it. The day Maggie Thornwell's HOA filed for eminent domain was the day I stopped playing defense. The certified letter came with official city seals and polite threats. They wanted my property for public safety reasons. Public safety. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. That was rich. Their public was 35 families living in houses built illegally on my land, and their safety meant keeping me from proving how deep their corruption went. By then, I'd documented everything: water diversion channels, tampered culverts, falsified permits. I could even trace every dollar from Rick Thornwell's city council fund to the contractors building those luxury homes. But I wasn't ready to strike just yet. You don't charge into battle blind. You build alliances, gather intelligence, and wait for the perfect weather. Literally. Texas was entering its rainiest September in years, and my dam was full, 1 million gallons strong. The ground was soaked, the air thick with humidity, and thunderheads were building every afternoon like nature was holding its breath. I spent my nights in Pop's old workshop, the smell of machine oil and dust thick in the air, studying blueprints of the dam and spillway system. He'd kept meticulous notes: flow rates, soil stability, flood control calculations. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. He'd designed that dam to last a century. Pops wasn't just a farmer, he was an engineer with a conscience. And buried in his notes was something extraordinary. An old clause from the 1978 flood management permit stating that the dam operator must maintain natural seasonal flow patterns to preserve downstream agriculture. That clause made everything Maggie built downstream illegal. Meanwhile, Maggie was stepping up her harassment campaign. Her neighborhood safety patrol parked SUVs at the end of my driveway every night. They took pictures of my house, filmed me fixing fences, even filed noise complaints when I ran the tractor. I started recognizing the same faces, 3 board members wearing matching Willowbrook Estates polo shirts. Then came the inspections. Building inspectors, animal control, the fire marshal, all showing up within 48 hours. They cited me for minor nonsense: cracked porch steps, unsafe barn storage, unauthorized water containment structure. The irony was bitter. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. They were calling my dam unauthorized while they were the ones diverting a natural creek without a single federal permit. But I stayed calm. Let them come. Every visit was another chance to collect evidence. I recorded every conversation, kept every notice, and built a file so thick it could crush a man's career. The final straw came when I found tire tracks near the spillway. Someone had tampered with the hydraulic gate system, trying to jam it with concrete mix. It was a deliberate act of sabotage, and potentially deadly. I called Deputy Rodriguez from the sheriff's office, one of the few honest men left in town. He stood with me in the rain, flashlight beam bouncing off the concrete. "They're scared, Jake," he said quietly. "If you've got proof, you're over the target." I did have proof, enough to bury Maggie and her cronies, but I wanted more than revenge. I wanted justice, the kind that couldn't be spun on a morning news show, so I called in reinforcements. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Amanda Cross was a young environmental attorney out of Dallas with a reputation for tearing corrupt HOAs to shreds. She took my call on a Friday evening, listened for 5 minutes, and said, "I'll drive down tonight." By Saturday morning, she was at my kitchen table, surrounded by coffee cups and stacks of documents. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, dust dancing in the air. She flipped through Pop's old permits and whistled softly. "Jake, this isn't just theft. This is federal wire fraud, environmental violation, and insurance fraud, all rolled into one. They've been lying to every agency under the sun." Together, we built a strategy. Amanda would handle the legal side, filing complaints with the EPA and the Texas Water Board. I'd handle the technical side, flow measurements, historical records, hydrological modeling. We'd hit them from both flanks at once. The deeper we dug, the uglier it got. Rick's construction company was the primary contractor for Willowbrook Estates. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. He'd approved the zoning changes himself from his city council seat. And the HOA's flood insurance policy? Built entirely on fraudulent data claiming no waterway existed on the property. I sat there, staring at that line of text in disbelief. No waterway exists on or adjacent to the development site. The very creek that fed my dam had been erased from the paperwork. I could almost hear Pops laughing from wherever he was. They think they can outsmart nature, Jake, but water remembers where it belongs. Then the weather turned. Late August storms rolled across Texas like something biblical. Thunder shook the windows, and every gust of wind carried the smell of wet cedar and ozone. The dam filled to 96% capacity. The overflow channel hummed softly beneath the surface, alive for the first time in decades. That's when the plan came together. Not revenge, but restoration. Amanda called it the demonstration. We would open the spillway gates, not to flood anyone, but to restore the creek to its natural path. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. It was legal, federally authorized, and environmentally sound. Every move would be documented by federal witnesses. I notified the volunteer fire department, posted public warnings, and sent registered letters to the HOA advising of scheduled agricultural water restoration per federal requirements. Every I dotted, every T crossed. But I knew Maggie wouldn't sit quietly. She'd escalate. She always did. Sure enough, 2 nights before the operation, my trail cameras caught movement near the dam again. 2 men in tactical vests trying to pour concrete into the sluice gate. I watched the footage in real time on my phone, heart pounding. I called Rodriguez, who arrived with his cruiser lights flashing. The arrests were quick. 1 man confessed instantly, hired by a neighborhood group concerned for their safety. Maggie's fingerprints were all over it. The next morning, she was on the local morning show, crocodile tears rolling down her cheeks. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. "This veteran has mental health issues," she told the host, clutching a tissue. "He's threatening to unleash a flood on innocent families." I sat in my kitchen, coffee going cold in my hands, and laughed. Because while she was crying on camera, Amanda and I were sitting on evidence so strong it could sink an entire neighborhood, literally and legally. The EPA had fast-tracked an investigation, the Texas Water Board was reviewing the fraudulent permits, and a storm was rolling in from the west. As the first drops of rain hit the tin roof, I looked out at that dam glistening in the gray light. Pops had built it for the community, to share the water, not hoard it. But now that same water was about to reveal the truth. The timing was perfect. The weather, the witnesses, the paperwork. And as I checked the hydraulic controls one last time, that old Army calm settled over me. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was fighting to bring the creek home. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. By sunrise, the storm had settled over Willowbrook Estates, like a gray blanket, thick with tension and static. The air smelled of wet dirt and diesel, the kind that clings to your clothes and never leaves. My boots sank into the soaked ground as I walked toward the dam controls. The gauge needle hovered right at the red line, full capacity. The moment was here. At 6:45 a.m., headlights appeared in the distance. Amanda's old Jeep crawled up the gravel path, followed by 2 government SUVs. Out stepped EPA agent Sarah Kim and my old buddy Tony Riggs. Their presence turned what Maggie called a quote, terrorist act into a federal operation. They'd come to witness, measure, and document every drop of water that would soon flow exactly where nature intended. By 7 a.m., the first flashes of blue and red lights blinked across the field. Sheriff's deputies, fire trucks, and, of course, the HOA's self-appointed security team in neon vests. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Maggie was there too, standing in the drizzle beside a Channel 7 news van, her perfect hair protected by a golf umbrella. Her husband, Rick, was pacing nearby, phone glued to his ear. I could hear him shouting into it. "He's about to destroy everything we built!" I stood calm beside the control panel, rain dripping from the brim of Pop's old cowboy hat. Amanda handed me a folder with the official court-stamped documents. Federal authorization for seasonal flood pattern restoration. Legal. Binding. Ironclad. Maggie shouted from across the barrier. "You're insane, Jake! You'll drown families!" Her voice cracked under the rain, but I didn't answer. Tony's voice came through my radio, steady and clear. "All federal witnesses confirmed. Proceed when ready." At 7:02 a.m. I pulled the first lever. The sound was like a living thing waking up. A deep groan of steel and earth. The water began to surge, white and foaming, through the spillway channels that hadn't been opened since 1982. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Within seconds, Willow Creek was alive again, flowing strong and sure through its natural bed. The rain mixed with the rush of water, creating a roar that echoed off the hills. Maggie screamed something, but her voice was lost in the wind. The crowd of HOA supporters gasped as the water carved its way down through the old creek path, bypassing the new neighborhood completely. The homes stood untouched on higher ground, just as my engineering calculations predicted. But their fancy decorative stream beds? They were gone in minutes, ripped away by the returning current. EPA agent Kim took flow readings while cameras rolled. "This is textbook restoration," she said. exactly matches the original watershed data. Behind her, Miguel Santos and Mrs. Chen stood side by side, tears streaking down their faces. Miguel knelt and cupped the flowing water in his rough hands. "This is what my grandfather prayed to see again," he said softly. Maggie's media stunt crumbled right there. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Her Facebook Live video showed nothing but a calm, controlled creek and a crowd cheering for its return. Rick tried to spin it, yelling that I'd destroyed millions in property value. But the cameras were focused on the water flowing perfectly within its natural channel. No flooding, no danger, just nature taking back what was hers. Then the real shock hit them. Tony stepped forward and handed Maggie a thick envelope. "Ma'am," he said formally, "the EPA is issuing a cease and desist order for all further development pending investigation into environmental violations, insurance fraud, and unlawful water diversion." The blood drained from her face. Rick dropped his phone, his shoulders sagging. The reporters swarmed. Amanda stood beside me, smiling just enough to show her satisfaction. "That," she whispered, "is what accountability looks like." 2 days later, we were in court. Judge Walsh tried to rush an emergency hearing, clearly hoping to protect his golf buddy Rick. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. The courtroom was packed. Farmers, reporters, residents, even former HOA members. Maggie's legal team opened with hysterics, claims of trauma, property damage, and, quote, veteran instability. They paraded fake experts who had never set foot on my property. Then Amanda stood and calmly handed the judge a binder thicker than a Bible. "Your Honor," she said, "this is federal evidence of environmental fraud, falsified insurance claims, and zoning corruption, all linked to the Willowbrook HOA." One by one, witnesses testified. Tony confirmed the dam's federal jurisdiction. Agent Kim verified that my flood operation matched natural, seasonal flow patterns exactly. Mrs. Chen described how her garden had died when the creek was diverted, and how, for the first time in a year, it now bloomed again. Miguel's testimony broke the room's silence. They called him crazy, but that man gave us our water back. Finally, I took the stand. My palms were steady, my voice even. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. My grandfather built that dam to protect this land, not to destroy it. I didn't flood homes. I restored a creek that's been here for generations. Amanda saved the knockout punch for last, a recording of Rick screaming into his phone during the spillway operation. "That psycho is destroying millions in property value. Do something before we lose everything." The courtroom erupted. Walsh slammed his gavel, but it was too late. The truth was out. When it was Maggie's turn to speak, her voice shook. "He came back from war damaged," she said, eyes darting toward me. "He's using military tactics to terrorize families." Amanda cut her off with one line that silenced the room. "The only thing he weaponized, ma'am, was the truth." The judge had no way out. He ruled that my operation was lawful under federal agricultural water rights, declared the HOA's zoning changes void, and referred Rick's actions to the state attorney general. Rick was arrested for fraud before the afternoon ended. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Maggie fainted in the hallway when reporters surrounded her. But the real victory came later that evening when I stood by the dam again. The rain had stopped. The sunset painted the sky orange and gold. The creek glistened below, winding through green fields like it had for generations. The air smelled clean again, fresh mud, cedar, and the faint sweetness of Mrs. Chen's blooming garden downstream. Within months, the development was abandoned. Banks foreclosed on half-built homes, insurance companies denied coverage, and the HOA dissolved completely. My land was restored to me, free and clear. Federal investigators fined the Thornwells millions and revoked Rick's city position permanently. Amanda stayed on to help rebuild. We formed the Willow Creek Conservation Trust to protect the watershed for good. Miguel's farm thrived again. Mrs. Chen's garden became a local landmark. The community that Maggie tried to erase came back stronger than ever. I didn't say a word when they handed me that eviction notice. Every morning, I walked to the dam with a cup of coffee and watched the water flow, calm and steady. The same sound Pops must have heard 40 years ago. I kept his old journal open to the page that said, "Sometimes you've got to flood the valley to save the creek." He was right. Water always finds its way home. And so does justice.